Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if the greatest sign that your twin flame union is real is not passion, intensity, or emotional fireworks? What if the real sign is peace? For many people walking the twin flame path, the story begins with chaos. It begins with overwhelming attraction, emotional highs and lows, sudden separations, and a connection that feels almost impossible to explain. You meet someone, and something inside you instantly recognizes them. Not in the ordinary way we recognize a new romantic partner. Not with the usual curiosity or excitement. It feels deeper, almost ancient. You look at them, and something in your soul whispers quietly, "I know you." But what follows that recognition is rarely easy. The twin flame journey often begins with intensity so strong that it shakes the foundations of both people's lives. Emotions become magnified. Old wounds rise to the surface. Unresolved fears appear out of nowhere. One person may run. The other may chase. Misunderstandings happen. Silence appears. Distance grows. And in those moments, many people begin to wonder, if this connection is so spiritual, why does it hurt so much? Why does something that feels destined also feel so unstable? Why does love sometimes feel like a battlefield instead of a sanctuary? The answer lies in something most people don't expect. The twin flame journey is not designed to create romance first. It is designed to create growth. Before two souls can truly unite, they must first confront the parts of themselves they've been avoiding for years, sometimes even lifetimes. The twin flame connection acts like a mirror. And mirrors can be uncomfortable, because they don't only show us the parts of ourselves we are proud of. They show us everything. Our fears of abandonment, our need for validation, our hidden insecurities, our ego. Every unresolved emotion begins to surface when the mirror appears. This is why the early stages of the twin flame journey are often filled with turbulence. Two people who feel deeply connected, but are not yet emotionally or spiritually ready to hold that connection. It is like two powerful rivers trying to merge while still carrying storms within them. The current becomes wild, unpredictable, sometimes even destructive. But something interesting begins to happen as time passes. After separation, after reflection, after the long nights of questioning, healing, and self-discovery, the intensity begins to change. Not disappear, but transform. The emotional storms slowly become quieter. The desperate need to hold on to the other person begins to soften. The need for constant reassurance fades. And something new starts to emerge. Peace. This is the moment when the twin flame connection begins to mature. Because true union is not built on emotional dependency. It is built on inner stability. Imagine two people meeting again after years of personal growth. Years of learning who they truly are. Years of facing their fears, their patterns, their past. When they look at each other again, the energy feels different. There is no longer the anxious tension of, "Will you leave me?" No silent test of loyalty. No desperate attempt to prove love. Instead, there is a calm recognition, a quiet understanding, the kind of presence that doesn't demand anything, only shares. This is the beginning of mature twin flame love. Not a love that consumes, but a love that stabilizes. Think about the difference between a wildfire and a steady flame. A wildfire is dramatic. It burns brightly. It spreads quickly. But it also destroys everything around it. A steady flame, however, is different. It warms. It illuminates. It lasts. Many people believe twin flame love must always feel like the wildfire. Constant intensity. Constant passion. Constant emotional movement. But in reality, the deepest form of love often looks much simpler. It looks like two people sitting quietly together and feeling completely at home. No performance. No emotional games. No fear of losing the connection. Just presence. Just trust. This is the kind of love that emerges when two souls have grown beyond the need to control each other. Because unconditional love cannot exist where control still lives. Ask yourself this question for a moment. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you tried to hold onto them tighter out of fear of losing them? Most of us have. We call it love. But often, it is actually fear wearing the mask of love. Fear of abandonment. Fear of loneliness. Fear of being forgotten. True twin flame union begins when those fears are no longer in control. It begins when two people no longer need each other to fill an emotional void. Instead, they meet as whole individuals. Two complete souls choosing connection, not depending on it. This is why the twin flame journey can take years, sometimes decades, because maturity cannot be rushed. Spiritual growth cannot be forced. Each soul must walk their own path of healing first. Only then can they stand beside each other without collapsing into old patterns. Imagine two trees growing side by side in a forest. At the beginning, they are fragile. Their roots are shallow. Strong winds could easily bend them. But as time passes, their roots grow deeper, stronger. They begin to stand tall on their own. And eventually something beautiful happens. Their branches begin to intertwine. Not because they need each other to survive, but because they have grown strong enough to share the same sky. This is what twin flame union truly represents. Not dependency, not obsession, not emotional chaos, but a mature love between two souls who have learned how to stand on their own and still choose to grow together. And perhaps the most surprising part of this journey is this. When union finally becomes possible, it no longer feels like a dramatic ending to a love story. It feels like coming home. Not the kind of home filled with noise and excitement, but the quiet kind. The kind where your soul can finally rest. Because for the first time, love no longer feels like something you must fight for. It feels natural, stable, peaceful. And maybe that is the greatest secret of twin flame union. It is not the moment when two people finally get what they wanted. It is the moment when both souls have grown enough to no longer need to chase love. Because they have become it. Many people believe love becomes stronger when two people finally reunite. But on the twin flame journey, something far more profound happens. Love itself transforms. In the early stages of connection, love often comes with expectations. Even when the feelings are genuine and powerful, there are still invisible conditions attached. Love me back. Stay with me. Don't leave.
Choose me.
These conditions are rarely spoken out loud. Most of the time, they exist quietly beneath the surface of our emotions. We believe we are loving freely, yet somewhere inside we are still asking for something in return. Reassurance, security, validation. And when those things are threatened, the connection begins to feel unstable. Arguments appear. Fear grows. One person may start holding tighter, trying to protect the relationship. The other may begin pulling away, feeling overwhelmed by the pressure. This pattern is common in many relationships, but it becomes especially intense in twin flame connections because the emotional mirror between the two souls is so powerful. Every fear becomes amplified. Every attachment becomes visible. And every hidden expectation slowly rises to the surface. At first, this can be confusing. People often ask themselves questions like, if this person is truly my twin flame, why do I feel so afraid of losing them? Why does this connection trigger so many emotional reactions inside me? The truth is that twin flames do not come into our lives to validate our emotional comfort zones. They come to transform the way we understand love itself. Because most of what we call love in our everyday lives is actually a mixture of love and attachment. Attachment says, I need you to stay so I can feel safe. Attachment says, if you leave, something inside me will break. Attachment says, my happiness depends on you. But unconditional love speaks a very different language. Unconditional love says, I love you because you exist. Not because you stay. Not because you fulfill my expectations. Not because you behave the way I want. Simply because you are. This kind of love is difficult for many people to understand at first because it challenges the way we have been taught to love since childhood. From a young age, we learn that love is often connected to approval. Children receive praise when they behave well. Relationships are rewarded when both partners meet each other's expectations. Even society often presents love as a kind of exchange. I give you loyalty, you give me commitment. I give you affection, you give me attention. There is nothing inherently wrong with these exchanges. But unconditional love goes beyond them. It is not based on trade. It is based on recognition. Recognition of the soul. On the twin flame journey, unconditional love rarely appears immediately. Instead, it is born slowly through the process of separation, healing, and personal growth. Imagine two people who once believed they could not live without each other. When separation happens, it can feel devastating at first. The mind begins searching for answers. Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? But over time, something subtle begins to change. Instead of focusing entirely on the other person, the attention slowly turns inward. People begin to ask different questions. What is this connection teaching me about myself? Why do I fear abandonment so deeply? Why do I feel incomplete when this person is not here? These questions mark the beginning of emotional maturity, because they shift the focus away from controlling the relationship and toward understanding the self. As healing continues, something remarkable begins to happen. The intense emotional grip that once defined the connection begins to loosen. Not because love disappears, but because it evolves. The fear of losing the other person becomes less dominant. The need to constantly know where the relationship is going begins to fade. Instead, love starts to exist in a quieter form, a more spacious form. You may still think about that person. You may still feel connected to them in ways that are difficult to explain. But the desperation is gone. The anxiety is gone. What remains is a deep, steady care for their well-being, even if they are not physically present in your life. This is one of the first signs that unconditional love is beginning to emerge. You start wanting happiness for them even if that happiness does not involve you. For many people, this realization feels almost paradoxical. How can you love someone deeply and still release the need to possess them? But this is exactly what unconditional love allows. It frees both souls from emotional imprisonment. Think of a bird resting in your hands. Attachment would close the fingers tightly, afraid the bird might fly away. Unconditional love, however, keeps the hands open. Not because you want the bird to leave, but because you respect its freedom. If the bird stays, it stays by choice. If it flies, you still appreciate the moment it shared with you. On the twin flame path, this shift is essential. Because union cannot exist where emotional captivity still dominates the connection. Two souls cannot truly unite if one is trying to control the other. True union requires freedom. Freedom to grow. Freedom to evolve. Freedom to choose the relationship again and again without fear. This is why many twin flame separations last for long periods of time. Sometimes years. Sometimes even longer. During that time, both individuals are learning how to love without attachment, how to care without controlling, how to remain open without losing themselves. And when unconditional love finally begins to blossom, something beautiful occurs. The energy between the two souls becomes lighter, less heavy with expectation, less burdened by emotional demands. Communication, if it returns, begins to feel more authentic, more honest, more calm. Conversations no longer revolve around proving love. They revolve around sharing truth. There is space for vulnerability without fear of rejection. Space for individuality without fear of abandonment. And perhaps the most profound transformation is this. Love stops feeling like something fragile. It stops feeling like something that could disappear overnight. Instead, it begins to feel timeless, like a quiet current that flows beneath the surface of life. Whether the two people are physically together or temporarily apart, the love itself remains steady. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but deeply present. This is the essence of unconditional love on the twin flame journey. It is not the kind of love that demands proof. It is the kind of love that trusts existence itself. Trusts that if two souls are truly meant to grow together, life will create the conditions for that reunion. And if their paths temporarily move in different directions, the love does not need to disappear. It simply continues evolving, quietly, patiently, beyond the limitations of fear. And in the end, this transformation is what prepares two souls for the possibility of union. Because union is not simply about two people finding each other again. It is about two individuals who have learned how to love without conditions finally meeting on equal ground. Two hearts no longer trying to possess each other, but choosing freely and consciously to walk the same path. Not out of need, but out of love. Many people imagine twin flame union as a magical moment. A moment when two people finally find their way back to each other after countless emotional storms. A moment where destiny intervenes, circumstances align, and love finally wins. But the truth is far more profound than that. Union does not happen simply because two people miss each other enough. It does not happen because the emotional connection is strong. And it certainly does not happen just because the bond feels spiritual or fated. Twin flame union becomes possible only when both souls reach a certain level of inner maturity. Without that maturity, the connection may remain powerful but unstable. The attraction may continue, but the relationship cannot sustain itself. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the twin flame journey. People often focus on the connection between the two individuals, believing that the strength of the bond itself will eventually bring them together. But the real transformation does not happen between them. It happens within them. Before union can occur, something important must change inside each person. Their relationship with themselves. Because the way we love another person is always a reflection of how we relate to our own inner world. If someone still feels incomplete alone, they will unconsciously expect their partner to complete them. If someone still carries deep fears of abandonment, they may become overly dependent on reassurance. If someone still struggles with self-worth, they may constantly look for validation from their partner. These emotional patterns are common in many relationships. But in the intense mirror of the twin flame connection, they become impossible to hide. Every insecurity becomes visible. Every unresolved wound eventually appears. And the connection itself begins to trigger the exact healing that both souls need. At first, this can feel overwhelming. Imagine two people who share a deep spiritual bond, yet every interaction between them seems to activate old emotional pain. One person may feel rejected. The other may feel pressured. One may chase closeness. The other may seek distance. From the outside, it might look like the relationship is failing. But from a deeper perspective, something important is happening. Both individuals are being pushed towards self-awareness. They are being invited to confront the parts of themselves they may have ignored for years. Because without that inner work, union cannot sustain itself. Think of emotional maturity as the foundation of a house. You can build beautiful walls, decorate the interior, and design stunning windows. But if the foundation underneath is unstable, the entire structure will eventually collapse. The same principle applies to relationships. No matter how powerful the connection is, it cannot survive long-term without emotional stability. This is why many twin flame connections go through long periods of separation. Not because the bond is weak, but because both individuals still have important inner work to do. During this time, life begins presenting lessons that gradually shape each person into a stronger version of themselves. Some people learn independence. They realize that their happiness cannot rely entirely on another person. Others learn self-worth. They begin recognizing that they deserve love without constantly proving themselves. Some learn patience. Others learn emotional boundaries. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, many learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. This transformation is rarely comfortable. In fact, it can feel like the opposite of what the heart initially wanted. Instead of immediate reunion, life creates distance. Instead of certainty, there are long periods of silence. Instead of answers, there are questions. But within that uncertainty, growth quietly takes place. Imagine a caterpillar entering a cocoon. From the outside, nothing appears to be happening. It may even look like a period of stillness or stagnation. Yet inside that cocoon, an extraordinary transformation is unfolding. The caterpillar is dissolving its old structure so that something entirely new can emerge. The same process happens on the twin flame journey. During separation, both individuals are slowly releasing the emotional patterns that once made the connection unstable. They begin building new foundations within themselves. Foundations made of self-respect, emotional balance, and inner peace. And as these changes accumulate, something remarkable begins to occur. The need for external validation begins to fade. The fear of abandonment loses its power. The intense emotional reactions that once defined the relationship begin to soften. Instead of reacting impulsively, people begin responding with awareness. Instead of trying to control the relationship, they begin trusting the natural flow of life. This shift is what creates emotional maturity. And emotional maturity changes the entire dynamic of the twin flame connection. Imagine two people meeting again after years of personal growth. In the past, small misunderstandings might have triggered arguments. Now, those same situations are approached with calm communication. In the past, silence might have created anxiety. Now, silence is simply understood as space. In the past, love felt fragile. Now, love feels steady. This transformation does not erase the intensity of the connection. The recognition between the two souls still exists. The deep emotional bond remains present. But something fundamental has changed. The relationship is no longer driven by emotional wounds. It is supported by emotional wisdom. And wisdom allows love to breathe. It allows both individuals to maintain their individuality while still sharing a deep connection. This balance is essential for twin flame union, because union is not meant to create dependency. It is meant to create partnership. Two individuals who have learned how to stand firmly in their own identity, choosing to walk side by side. Think of two mountains standing near each other. Each one is strong on its own. Each one has its own structure, its own presence. Yet together, they create a landscape that is even more powerful. Neither mountain needs the other to exist, but their presence together creates harmony. This is the kind of stability that union requires. A connection where both people are emotionally grounded enough to support each other without losing themselves. Where love becomes a shared experience rather than an emotional rescue mission. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this maturity is the quiet confidence it creates. When two souls reach this stage, they no longer feel the need to constantly question the connection. They do not need endless reassurance. They do not need to control the future. Instead, they trust something deeper. They trust the journey. They trust the timing of life. And most importantly, they trust themselves. Because once a person has done the inner work required for emotional maturity, they no longer fear love. They no longer fear loss. They understand that connection is not something that must be forced. It is something that unfolds naturally when two people are ready. This is why twin flame union often happens when both individuals least expect it. Not when they are desperately searching for it, but when they have finally become whole enough to live their lives without needing it. At that point, union is no longer about filling an emotional void. It becomes something far more beautiful. Two mature souls recognizing each other once again, and choosing to walk forward together. Not because they cannot live without each other, but because they have grown strong enough to share the same path. One of the most surprising truths about twin flame union is this: when it finally arrives, it often feels far less dramatic than people imagine. Many people walking the twin flame path expect the final reunion to feel like an explosion of emotions, tears, confessions, passionate declarations of love, and a dramatic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. But real union rarely looks like that. Instead of chaos, it brings calm. Instead of emotional storms, it brings stillness. And for many people, this shift can feel almost confusing at first. Because for so long, the connection was defined by intensity, by uncertainty, by moments of closeness followed by painful distance. The early stages of the twin flame journey often feel like a powerful storm moving through two people's lives. One moment, the connection feels magical, almost otherworldly. The next moment, something small triggers a misunderstanding. Emotions rise quickly. Defenses appear. Old wounds become activated. Sometimes the relationship moves into the well-known dynamic of running and chasing. One person pulls away, needing space. The other tries to hold the connection together. Both are responding to their fears, even if they do not fully understand them yet. During these stages, the relationship can feel exhausting. Not because the love is weak, but because the emotional patterns surrounding that love are still unstable. Imagine two people trying to hold a delicate flame while standing in the middle of a strong wind. No matter how carefully they try to protect it, the flame keeps flickering. Sometimes it almost goes out. Sometimes it suddenly burns too brightly. But it never feels completely steady. This is what many twin flame relationships feel like before union. The love is real, but the emotional environment around that love is still chaotic. And chaos makes stability impossible. However, something important begins to happen as both individuals grow and heal. The wind slowly begins to calm. The emotional reactions that once felt uncontrollable start to soften. The fears that once dominated the connection lose their grip. Instead of reacting immediately to every emotional trigger, both people begin to pause. They begin to observe their feelings instead of being consumed by them. And that small shift changes everything. Because emotional peace is not created by eliminating challenges. It is created by learning how to respond to them differently. Think about how two people might handle conflict during the early stages of the twin flame journey. A simple misunderstanding might quickly turn into an argument. Words are spoken in frustration. Silence follows. Both people retreat into their own emotional defenses. The connection feels fragile again. Now imagine the same situation years later, after both individuals have grown emotionally and spiritually. The misunderstanding still happens. But the response is different. Instead of reacting with anger, one person pauses and asks a simple question. Can you help me understand what you meant? Instead of assuming rejection, the other explains calmly. No, that's not what I meant at all. Within minutes, the tension dissolves. What once would have created a deep emotional rift now becomes a moment of understanding. This is the quiet power of maturity. And it is one of the clearest signs that the connection has evolved. Drama disappears when emotional wounds stop controlling behavior. Because most relationship drama is not actually caused by the present moment. It is caused by unresolved emotions from the past. A comment reminds someone of childhood criticism. A moment of distance triggers a memory of abandonment. A disagreement activates fears of rejection. Without awareness, people react to these old wounds as if they are happening again. But when healing takes place, those wounds lose their power. The past stops dictating the present, and the relationship becomes calmer as a result. This transformation can feel almost unbelievable to people who remember how intense the connection once was. They might think back to the early days and ask themselves, how did we go from that chaos to this peace? The answer lies in emotional growth. Both individuals have learned how to regulate their own inner world. They no longer depend on the relationship to stabilize their emotions. Instead, they bring stability into the relationship. And when two stable people come together, the entire dynamic changes. The connection becomes a place of safety rather than tension. It becomes a space where both individuals can simply be themselves, without performance, without constant emotional negotiation, without fear. Imagine sitting next to someone and feeling completely relaxed in their presence. No pressure to say the perfect thing. No anxiety about whether they will leave. No need to prove your worth. Just a quiet sense that everything is okay. This kind of peace is often what real twin flame union feels like. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but deeply grounding. It feels like returning home after a long and difficult journey. The outside world may still contain challenges. Life will still bring responsibilities, stress, and unexpected changes. but the connection itself becomes a stable center, a place where both people can recharge and support each other. This is why many people who experience union describe it as surprisingly simple. After years of emotional complexity, the relationship finally becomes easy. Conversations flow naturally. Decisions are made together, without power struggles. Both people respect each other's independence. And most importantly, love stops feeling like something fragile. Instead, it feels strong and steady, like a quiet river that continues flowing regardless of temporary obstacles. Of course, this does not mean that conflict disappears entirely. Every relationship between two human beings will still encounter moments of disagreement. But the difference lies in how those disagreements are handled. Instead of creating emotional chaos, they become opportunities for deeper understanding. Instead of pushing people apart, they bring them closer. Because both individuals now share the same intention, growth. They no longer see each other as adversaries during difficult moments. They see each other as partners navigating life together. And perhaps this is the most beautiful transformation of all. The connection that once felt like an emotional roller coaster becomes a source of stability. The person who once triggered your deepest fears becomes someone who understands your soul. Not because they never make mistakes, but because both of you have learned how to approach those mistakes with compassion, with patience, with humility. This is what happens when drama turns into peace. Love stops being a battlefield. It becomes a sanctuary. And in that sanctuary, something extraordinary happens. Two souls who once struggled to understand each other finally discover that the greatest form of intimacy is not intensity. It is calm presence. The kind of presence that says, "You don't have to fight for love anymore. You can simply live it." One of the deepest transformations in the twin flame journey happens quietly, almost invisibly. It is the moment when love stops being about needing someone and becomes about choosing someone. At first, this difference may seem subtle, but in reality, it changes everything. In the early stages of many relationships, including twin flame connections, people often feel an overwhelming sense of emotional dependency. The connection feels so powerful that it becomes difficult to imagine life without the other person. Thoughts constantly revolve around them. Their presence brings intense happiness. Their absence creates deep emotional pain. And when this happens, the relationship can slowly begin to feel like a necessity rather than a choice. Many people describe the early twin flame connection with phrases like, "I can't live without them. They're my other half. Without them, something inside me feels incomplete." These expressions sound romantic, and in many ways they reflect the depth of the connection. But they also reveal something important about the emotional state of the individuals involved. Because when someone believes they cannot exist fully without another person, love becomes mixed with dependency. Dependency can create powerful emotional bonds, but it also introduces pressure into the relationship. If one person feels responsible for the other's emotional stability, they may begin to feel overwhelmed. If one person believes their happiness depends entirely on the relationship, every small conflict may feel like a threat to their well-being. This dynamic often leads to the push and pull pattern that many twin flames experience. One person becomes more attached, seeking reassurance and closeness. The other begins to withdraw, feeling the weight of expectations. Neither person is wrong. Both are simply reacting to emotional patterns they may not yet fully understand. But over time, something begins to shift. The separation phases of the twin flame journey often force individuals to confront an uncomfortable truth. They must learn how to stand on their own. During periods of distance, life continues moving forward. People build careers. They form friendships. They explore their passions. They begin to rediscover who they are as individuals. At first, this process can feel painful, especially if someone has spent a long time believing that their happiness depends on the presence of their twin flame. But slowly, something remarkable begins to happen. They realize that their identity is larger than the relationship. They begin to feel whole again, independent of whether the other person is physically present in their life. This realization does not erase the connection. The love may still exist. The recognition between souls may still feel real, but the emotional dynamic changes. The relationship is no longer the center of their entire world. Instead, it becomes one meaningful part of a much larger life. This is where the transformation from need to choice begins. Imagine two people who once felt emotionally dependent on each other. After years of personal growth, they meet again. In the past, their interactions may have been filled with subtle pressure. Questions like, "Do you still love me? Are you going to stay? Where is this relationship going?" These questions are driven by fear. Fear of losing the connection. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of being left behind. But now something feels different. Both individuals have built lives that stand on their own. They have learned how to find happiness within themselves. They no longer need another person to fill an emotional void. And because of this, the connection becomes lighter. There is no longer a sense of emotional obligation. Neither person feels trapped by expectations. Instead, they simply enjoy each other's presence. This shift creates a new kind of love. A love based on freedom. Freedom is one of the most important elements of mature relationships. Because true intimacy cannot grow in an environment where people feel forced to stay. If someone remains in a relationship only out of fear, obligation, or dependency, the connection slowly becomes heavy. Resentment may begin to appear. Authenticity disappears. But when two people choose each other freely, something beautiful happens. Every moment together becomes meaningful, not because it is required, but because it is wanted. Think about the difference between a person who stays in a room because the door is locked and someone who stays even though the door is wide open. In the first situation, their presence is controlled. In the second, it is voluntary. Which kind of presence feels more genuine? Which kind of love feels more real? This is the foundation of mature twin flame union. Two individuals who have learned how to live fully on their own, choosing to share their lives with each other. This choice is powerful because it removes the emotional pressure that once created instability. There is no longer a need to constantly prove love. There is no longer a need to cling to the relationship. Both people understand that they could walk their own path if necessary. And paradoxically, that understanding often makes the bond stronger. Because love becomes a conscious decision, not a survival strategy. Imagine two travelers walking along separate paths through a vast landscape. Each traveler is capable of continuing their journey alone. Each one has their own direction, their own purpose. But when their paths cross, they recognize something special in each other. Instead of merging out of necessity, they decide to walk together. Step by step, day by day. Not because they cannot survive apart, but because the journey becomes richer when shared. This is the essence of choosing love. And on the twin flame journey, this transformation is essential for union. Because union is not meant to create emotional dependence. It is meant to create partnership. A partnership where both individuals remain whole. Where individuality is respected rather than sacrificed. Where love enhances life instead of replacing it. This is why mature twin flame relationships often feel surprisingly balanced. Both people continue pursuing their own passions. They maintain their friendships and personal interests. They support each other's growth without trying to control it. The relationship becomes a place of encouragement rather than limitation. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this dynamic is the quiet gratitude that emerges. When love is no longer based on need, every shared moment feels like a gift. Simple things become meaningful. A conversation over dinner. A shared laugh. A quiet walk together. These moments are not taken for granted because both people understand something important. Love is most powerful when it is freely chosen. Every day. Again and again. This is the love that emerges when the twin flame journey reaches maturity. Not the desperate love of emotional survival. Not the dramatic love of constant intensity. But a calm, steady love built on freedom and respect. Two individuals standing strong in their own identities, looking at each other and saying, without fear or pressure, "I don't need you to complete me, but I choose you to walk beside me." Many people believe that twin flame union is the final destination of the journey, the moment when everything falls into place, the moment when the story reaches its happy ending. But in truth, union is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new one. Because the purpose of a twin flame connection has never been only about romantic fulfillment. Its deeper purpose is evolution. The evolution of two souls who have agreed, at some level beyond ordinary awareness, to grow together through life. When union finally becomes possible, it does not mean that all challenges disappear. Life does not suddenly become perfect. Responsibilities still exist. Unexpected changes still happen. Moments of difficulty still arise. But the difference lies in how those challenges are faced. Instead of walking through life alone, two souls now walk side by side. Not as people trying to complete each other, but as individuals supporting each other's growth. This shift transforms the entire meaning of the relationship, because love is no longer just an emotional experience. It becomes a shared path of development. Imagine two climbers standing at the base of a mountain. Each one has the strength to climb alone. Each one has their own skills, their own determination. But climbing together offers something unique. They can encourage each other when the path becomes difficult. They can help each other overcome obstacles. They can celebrate every small victory along the way. And most importantly, they can remind each other why the journey matters. This is what the twin flame union represents. Not a final destination, but a partnership in growth. Both individuals continue evolving. Both continue learning about themselves, about life, about the deeper nature of love. And as they evolve, the relationship evolves with them. Because a connection between two conscious individuals is never static. It grows. It expands. It transforms. One of the most beautiful aspects of mature twin flame union is that both people begin to inspire each other's highest potential. Not through pressure, not through criticism, but through example. When one person commits to personal growth, it naturally encourages the other to do the same. When one person practices patience, compassion, or courage, it creates an atmosphere where those qualities can flourish. The relationship becomes a mirror of possibility. Each person sees in the other what they themselves are capable of becoming. This dynamic creates a powerful environment for spiritual evolution. Think about how much easier it can be to stay committed to growth when someone beside you understands the journey. When both people share the intention of becoming better, wiser, and more compassionate human beings. Instead of holding each other back, they lift each other forward. This is very different from relationships built purely on comfort. In some partnerships, people unconsciously resist change. Growth can feel threatening because it disrupts familiar patterns. But in a mature twin flame connection, growth is welcomed, even when it feels uncomfortable, because both individuals understand that evolution is part of their shared purpose. Sometimes this growth takes the form of emotional healing. Old wounds may still surface from time to time. But now, instead of reacting defensively, both people approach those moments with awareness. They recognize that healing is an ongoing process, and they support each other through it. Other times, growth appears in the form of life decisions, career paths, creative passions, personal dreams. Instead of competing with each other's ambitions, they encourage them, because they understand that each person's individual fulfillment strengthens the relationship as a whole. Imagine two musicians playing in the same orchestra. Each instrument has its own sound, its own rhythm. If one instrument tries to dominate the entire performance, the music becomes unbalanced. But when each musician expresses their unique role while remaining in harmony with the others, something beautiful emerges. A symphony. The same principle applies to twin flame union. Each individual continues developing their own gifts, talents, and purpose. But they do so while remaining connected to a shared rhythm, a shared direction, a shared commitment to growth. This harmony creates something greater than the sum of its parts. The relationship itself becomes a source of inspiration for both individuals, a place where ideas, creativity, and compassion can flourish. And in many cases, this evolution extends beyond the relationship itself. Twin flames often feel inspired to contribute something meaningful to the world around them. Sometimes this takes the form of creative expression, art, writing, music, or storytelling. Sometimes it appears through acts of service, helping others heal, guiding people through their own struggles, or simply offering kindness where it is needed. Not every twin flame partnership will share the same external mission, but many discover that their connection naturally generates a desire to bring more light into the world. This does not require grand gestures or dramatic achievements. Sometimes the most powerful contributions are the quiet ones. A conversation that helps someone feel understood. A moment of compassion that eases another person's pain. A simple act of courage that inspires others to follow their own truth. When two people walk the path of evolution together, their influence often spreads far beyond their personal lives. Their presence becomes a reminder that love can be mature, stable, and transformative. And perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this shared evolution is the way it deepens the connection over time. In relationships based only on attraction, the intensity may fade as years pass. But when two people are committed to growth, the bond continues expanding. Every challenge overcome together strengthens trust. Every lesson learned together deepens understanding. Every new stage of life reveals new dimensions of the relationship. Love becomes something dynamic, something alive, something that continues unfolding. Imagine two rivers merging into a single flow. At the beginning, each river has its own path, its own currents and direction. But once they join, they create a larger, stronger movement. The water does not lose its identity. Instead, it becomes part of something greater. This is what happens when two souls choose to evolve together. Their individual journeys continue, but they also become part of a shared experience, a shared story, a shared transformation. And perhaps this is the true meaning of twin flame union. Not simply two people loving each other, but two souls walking through life with the same intention.
To grow.
To learn. To become the highest version of themselves. Side by side. Step by step. Year after year. Not because the journey is easy, but because the journey is meaningful. And when love becomes part of that evolution, something extraordinary happens. It stops being just a relationship. It becomes a path. One of the most mysterious aspects of the twin flame journey is the feeling that the other person somehow reflects parts of you that you never noticed before. People often describe this experience in very simple words. Being with them feels like looking into a mirror. At first, this idea can sound poetic, almost symbolic. But for those who have truly experienced a deep twin flame connection, the mirror effect feels very real. The other person seems to reveal emotions, patterns, and even hidden aspects of your personality that you may have never fully understood. Sometimes this reflection feels beautiful. You see your strengths through their eyes, your kindness, your creativity, your courage. Their admiration reminds you of qualities you may have underestimated within yourself. But at other times, the mirror becomes uncomfortable because it does not only show your light, it also reveals your shadows, your insecurities, your fears, your emotional wounds. In the early stages of the twin flame journey, this mirror effect can feel overwhelming. Imagine spending years building a certain image of yourself, a belief about who you are, how you behave, and how you relate to others. Then suddenly someone enters your life who seems to see through all of it. Not in a judgmental way, but in a deeply perceptive way. They sense your emotions even when you do not express them. They notice your defenses even when you try to hide them. They respond to parts of you that you did not even realize were there. This level of emotional reflection can create both fascination and discomfort. On one hand, it feels incredibly intimate. On the other hand, it can feel almost too revealing. Because when someone sees you that clearly, you can no longer hide from yourself. This is one reason why twin flame relationships often trigger strong emotional reactions. The mirror does not allow avoidance. Every unresolved issue eventually surfaces. Every hidden fear eventually finds expression. At first, this process may create tension between the two individuals. One person may feel exposed. The other may feel misunderstood. Both may struggle to understand why the connection feels so intense. But from a deeper perspective, the mirror serves a very important purpose. It helps both souls recognize the areas where growth is needed. Think about how difficult it can be to identify our own blind spots. Many of our emotional patterns develop slowly over time. They become so familiar that we stop noticing them. For example, someone who fears abandonment may unconsciously seek constant reassurance in relationships. Someone who struggles with self-worth may repeatedly sacrifice their own needs to gain approval. These behaviors can continue for years without conscious awareness. But when a twin flame connection appears, those patterns suddenly become visible. The mirror reflects them clearly, not as criticism, but as truth. At first, this reflection can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the identity we have built around ourselves. But over time, something remarkable begins to happen. Instead of seeing the mirror as a threat, people begin to recognize it as an opportunity. An opportunity for self-discovery. An opportunity for healing. An opportunity for transformation. This shift in perspective is a crucial step in the twin flame journey, because the purpose of the mirror is not to create conflict. It is to reveal the deeper layers of the soul. When both individuals begin to embrace this process, the connection becomes a powerful catalyst for personal growth. Imagine two people who once triggered each other's insecurities. One person's silence used to create anxiety. The other person's emotional intensity used to create pressure. Every interaction seemed to activate a new misunderstanding. But as time passes and both individuals begin working on themselves, the mirror effect changes. Instead of reacting defensively, they start observing what the reflection is showing them. If jealousy appears, they ask themselves where that feeling comes from. If fear arises, they explore its origins. If anger surfaces, they examine the deeper pain beneath it. This level of self-awareness transforms the entire dynamic of the relationship. The mirror is no longer something to resist. It becomes something to learn from. And as both individuals grow, the reflection itself becomes clearer. Instead of only revealing wounds, it begins to reveal potential. You begin to see in the other person the qualities you are developing within yourself. Their patience reflects your own growing patience. Their honesty reflects your own commitment to truth. Their courage reflects your own willingness to face life authentically. The mirror evolves as the individuals evolve. And eventually, something beautiful begins to emerge. The reflection becomes harmonious. Imagine two people standing in front of each other, no longer trying to hide their imperfections. They recognize that both of them are still learning, still growing, still evolving. Instead of judging each other's flaws, they approach them with compassion. Instead of fearing vulnerability, they welcome it. Because they understand that authenticity is the foundation of true intimacy. This stage of the twin flame connection feels very different from the earlier stages. The emotional intensity is still present, but it is no longer chaotic. It becomes grounding. The mirror no longer exposes wounds without purpose. It reflects wisdom. It reflects growth. It reflects the soul itself. And perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this reflection is the sense of recognition it creates. When two souls reach this level of understanding, they begin to see each other not only as partners, but as companions on the same inner journey. Each person becomes a reminder of the other's highest potential, a reminder of the strength that lies beneath past struggles, a reminder that transformation is always possible. This kind of love is rare because it requires courage. The courage to look honestly at oneself. The courage to accept imperfections. The courage to continue growing even when the process feels uncomfortable. But when two people are willing to embrace that courage together, the mirror becomes something extraordinary. It becomes a doorway to deeper awareness, a doorway to deeper connection, and ultimately, a doorway to the kind of love that reflects not just personality, but the soul itself. For many people, the idea of a twin flame connection carries an almost mystical quality. It is often imagined as something extraordinary, an intense spiritual bond that exists beyond the ordinary world. Because of this, some people assume that twin flame union must feel like a constant state of transcendence. A life filled with deep conversations, spiritual awakenings, and moments of profound emotional connection. But the truth is much more grounded than that. Real twin flame union does not exist outside of everyday life. It exists within it. It exists in the ordinary moments that make up the rhythm of daily living. Work, responsibilities, family, decisions about the future, financial pressures, unexpected challenges. All of these realities remain present even when two souls finally reach union. The difference is not that life becomes easier. The difference is how the two people navigate life together. In the early stages of the twin flame journey, people often focus almost entirely on the emotional and spiritual aspects of the connection. They analyze every sign, every feeling, every moment of synchronicity. The connection feels mysterious and powerful, and naturally the mind tries to understand it. But once union becomes real, the focus slowly shifts. The relationship must learn how to function in the real world. Because love, no matter how spiritual it feels, still lives inside human lives. Imagine two people who once spent years separated, wondering if they would ever find their way back to each other. When they finally reunite, the connection may feel magical at first. But after the initial excitement fades, life begins to return to its normal rhythm. Morning routines, work schedules, household responsibilities, family gatherings. At first, this transition can feel surprising. Some people expect the relationship to always feel extraordinary. But mature love does not rely on constant emotional intensity. Instead, it finds meaning in the quiet stability of shared daily life. Think about the small moments that define real relationships. Preparing a meal together, driving somewhere in comfortable silence, talking about plans for the week, supporting each other after a long day. These moments may appear simple, even ordinary, but they carry a deep kind of intimacy, because true connection is not measured only by dramatic experiences. It is measured by how two people show up for each other in the ordinary flow of life. For twin flames who have gone through years of separation and growth, these everyday moments often feel especially meaningful. The simple act of being together can feel like a quiet miracle. After so much uncertainty, stability becomes precious. But integrating a deep spiritual connection into everyday life also requires balance. Because both individuals still have personal responsibilities and goals. Careers must be built. Dreams must be pursued. Family relationships must be maintained. If the relationship becomes the sole focus of life again, the old patterns of dependency could return. This is why mature twin flame union emphasizes independence within partnership. Both individuals continue living their own lives while sharing a common space. They support each other's ambitions rather than competing with them. For example, one person may be deeply committed to their career or creative work. The other understands and respects that dedication. Instead of feeling neglected, they take pride in their partner's growth. In return, the other partner offers encouragement and emotional support. This dynamic creates a relationship where both individuals feel free to expand. The connection becomes a foundation rather than a limitation. Another important aspect of everyday union is communication. In earlier stages of the twin flame journey, communication may have been difficult. Misunderstandings were common. Emotional triggers made it hard to express feelings clearly. But after years of growth and self-awareness, communication becomes more open and honest. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, both people approach them with curiosity and respect. They listen carefully. They speak honestly. They seek understanding rather than victory. This approach allows the relationship to adapt to the realities of life. Because every couple will eventually face challenges. Financial stress, health concerns, changes in career or location, family conflicts. These situations test the strength of any partnership. But for two people who have already faced deep emotional transformation, these challenges often become opportunities to strengthen their bond. Instead of seeing problems as threats to the relationship, They see them as situations to solve together. The connection becomes a team effort. Two individuals supporting each other through the complexities of life. And sometimes, the most meaningful expressions of love appear in very small actions. One partner notices that the other is tired and offers help. A quiet gesture of care after a difficult day. A reassuring conversation during moments of uncertainty. These acts may seem minor, but they build trust over time. They create a sense of reliability. A sense that no matter what happens in the outside world, there is someone beside you who understands and supports you. This sense of partnership is what allows spiritual love to exist within practical life. Because the twin flame connection is not meant to escape reality. It is meant to transform how two people experience reality together. Imagine two individuals walking through a busy city. The streets are filled with noise, movement, and endless activity. But as they walk side by side, they share a quiet awareness of each other. A glance, a smile, a small gesture of connection. Even within the chaos of the world, they carry a sense of calm together. This is what everyday union feels like. The relationship becomes a steady presence within the movement of life. It does not require constant attention to remain strong. It simply exists, naturally integrated into the flow of daily experience. And over time, this ordinary life together becomes something beautiful. The relationship grows through shared memories, through moments of laughter, through challenges overcome side by side. What once felt like a mysterious spiritual bond slowly becomes a lived reality, a partnership rooted in both love and practicality. Because true spiritual connection is not separate from life. It is expressed through life, through the way two people treat each other, through the way they support each other's growth, through the way they navigate both joy and difficulty together. This is the quiet power of mature twin flame union. Not a love that floats above reality, but a love that walks through reality, step by step, hand in hand. And in doing so, it transforms the ordinary moments of life into something extraordinary. One of the most common questions people ask about the twin flame journey is simple, yet deeply personal. Where am I in this process? Am I still in separation? Am I approaching union? Or am I only imagining this connection? These questions arise naturally because the twin flame path rarely follows a clear, predictable timeline. Unlike traditional relationships, where progress is often measured through visible milestones, dating, commitment, living together, the twin flame journey unfolds primarily on the level of inner transformation. This means that the most important changes are not always visible from the outside. They happen quietly within the soul. And because of that, many people struggle to recognize their own progress. They may still feel connected to their twin flame, yet the external situation has not changed. They may still think about the other person, yet their emotions feel calmer than before. They may feel both acceptance and curiosity at the same time. This mixture of feelings can create confusion. But in reality, these experiences often signal that the journey itself is evolving. To understand where you might be on the path, it is helpful to observe not the relationship alone, but your own internal state. Because the stages of the twin flame journey are reflected primarily through inner changes. In the earliest stages, the connection usually feels overwhelming. The attraction is powerful. The emotional intensity is undeniable. Thoughts about the other person appear constantly. You may feel as though something extraordinary has entered your life, yet you cannot fully explain why. During this phase, many people become focused almost entirely on the connection. They search for meaning in every interaction. Every text message feels important. Every silence feels heavy. The mind begins analyzing every detail. What did they mean when they said that? Why did they suddenly pull away? Does this mean we are meant to be together? This stage is driven largely by emotional energy. The soul recognizes something significant, but the mind has not yet learned how to understand it. As the journey continues, the next stage often introduces separation. Sometimes this separation is physical. Sometimes it is emotional. Either way, distance appears. And when it does, many people experience deep confusion. They may ask themselves, if this connection was so real, why did it fall apart? Why would something so meaningful end so abruptly? But the separation phase has a purpose that may not be immediately visible. It creates space for individual growth. Without that distance, both individuals might remain trapped in the same emotional patterns that originally destabilized the connection. Separation encourages self-reflection. Instead of focusing entirely on the other person, attention slowly begins to turn inward. People begin asking deeper questions about themselves. Why did this relationship affect me so strongly? What fears did it reveal in me? What parts of myself still need healing? These questions can lead to significant personal transformation. People may begin exploring emotional healing, spiritual growth, or personal development. They may discover new passions, new interests, or new perspectives about life. And gradually, something important begins to change. The emotional intensity that once dominated their thoughts begins to soften. They may still feel connected to their twin flame, but the feeling is less urgent, less desperate. Instead of constantly searching for signs or answers, they begin focusing on living their own lives. This shift often marks a critical turning point in the journey, because it represents the movement from attachment toward acceptance. Acceptance does not mean the connection disappears. It simply means that the individual has stopped trying to control the outcome. They begin trusting that whatever is meant to unfold will happen in its own time. During this stage, people often notice a new sense of emotional stability. They no longer feel overwhelmed by the connection. They can think about their twin flame without feeling consumed by longing. They may even feel genuine happiness for the other person, regardless of the current circumstances. This emotional balance is one of the strongest indicators of inner growth, because it shows that love is no longer being driven by fear or dependency. Instead, it is grounded in understanding. Some people eventually experience a renewed connection with their twin flame after reaching this stage. Communication may return. The relationship may reappear in a more balanced form. But even if external reunion does not occur immediately, the inner state has already changed. The person feels whole within themselves. And that wholeness is the true preparation for union. Because twin flame union does not occur simply because two people reconnect. It occurs when both individuals have reached a level of emotional maturity where the relationship can exist without repeating old patterns. This is why focusing only on external signs can sometimes be misleading. People often look for dramatic indicators that union is approaching, sudden messages, unexpected meetings, powerful synchronicities. While such events can happen, they are not the most reliable indicators of progress. The most meaningful signs appear within. You may notice that you no longer feel the need to chase the connection. You may realize that your happiness no longer depends on the other person's actions. You may feel grateful for the experience of the journey itself, regardless of the final outcome. These inner changes are subtle, but they are powerful. They show that the soul has learned the lessons that the connection was meant to reveal. And once those lessons are integrated, the entire energy of the relationship shifts. If union eventually occurs, it will not feel like the chaotic intensity of the early stages. It will feel calm, stable, natural, like two people meeting again after a long period of growth. Without pressure, without expectations, simply recognizing that they are now capable of walking the same path together. But even if that reunion takes time or unfolds differently than expected, the personal transformation that emerged from the journey remains invaluable. Because the twin flame path ultimately teaches something deeper than romantic fulfillment. It teaches self-awareness, self-love, and the ability to form connections based on authenticity rather than fear. So when you ask yourself where you are on the journey, the most important question may not be about the relationship at all. It may be about your own inner state. Are you still searching desperately for answers? Or have you begun to find peace within yourself? Because the closer you move toward that inner peace, the closer you move toward the true purpose of the journey. Not simply to find someone else, but to rediscover the deepest truth of your own soul. At the beginning of the twin flame journey, love often feels intense, confusing, and unpredictable. It can feel like a storm entering your life without warning. One moment, everything seems magical. The connection feels deeper than anything you have ever experienced before. You feel seen, understood, and emotionally awakened in ways that surprise you. But the next moment something changes. Distance appears. Misunderstandings arise. Silence replaces connection. And suddenly the same love that once felt magical begins to feel painful. This emotional roller coaster is one of the most common experiences on the twin flame path. It is also the reason many people initially believe that this journey is meant to be dramatic. They assume that the intensity itself is proof of the connection. But as the journey continues and both individuals grow, a very different truth begins to reveal itself. The ultimate destination of this path is not intensity. It is peace. This realization often surprises people who have spent years experiencing the emotional highs and lows of the connection. They may have imagined union as a dramatic reunion, an emotional climax where everything finally makes sense and the passion reaches its highest point. But when real union becomes possible, the feeling is often much quieter. Instead of overwhelming excitement, there is calm. Instead of emotional chaos, there is clarity. Instead of uncertainty, there is trust. Love begins to feel stable in a way that once seemed impossible. To understand why this shift happens, it is important to recognize how much both individuals have changed during the journey. In the early stages, the connection activated many hidden emotional patterns. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability. These fears often created intense reactions that made the relationship unstable. One person might pull away to protect themselves. The other might chase the connection out of fear of losing it. Both were responding to their emotional wounds rather than their true selves. But as time passed and both individuals began healing, those patterns slowly began to dissolve. They learned how to regulate their emotions. They learned how to communicate honestly. They learned how to stand confidently in their own identity without needing constant validation. And as these inner changes accumulated, something remarkable began to happen. The connection itself transformed. Instead of triggering emotional chaos, it began to create emotional balance. Instead of amplifying fear, it encouraged trust. The relationship gradually shifted from a battlefield of emotions into a place of safety. Imagine walking through a long and difficult journey across a rough landscape. The path is filled with obstacles. There are moments when you feel lost, moments when you question whether the journey is worth it. But eventually, after many challenges, you reach a peaceful valley. The air is calm. The ground is stable. For the first time in a long while, you can finally rest. This is what mature twin flame union often feels like. Not the dramatic climax of a love story, but the quiet relief of finally arriving somewhere safe. And in that peaceful space, love begins to express itself differently. It becomes less about emotional excitement and more about deep presence. Two people simply enjoying each other's company, sharing conversations without hidden fears, supporting each other through life's responsibilities, growing together while still maintaining their individuality. This kind of love may appear simple from the outside, but its simplicity is what makes it powerful, because it is built on emotional maturity rather than emotional reaction. Many people believe that passionate love must always feel intense. They associate excitement with authenticity, but intensity often comes from unresolved emotions, from the push and pull of attachment and fear. Peaceful love, on the other hand, comes from understanding. It comes from knowing that the connection does not need constant drama to remain meaningful. Imagine sitting beside someone in complete silence and feeling entirely comfortable. No pressure to fill the space with words. No anxiety about whether the relationship is secure. Just the quiet awareness that you are both present. That kind of peace is one of the most beautiful expressions of mature love. It means that both individuals have learned how to be fully themselves without fear of rejection. They no longer need to perform or prove their worth. They can simply exist. And when two people reach this level of comfort with each other, the relationship becomes a sanctuary. a place where both individuals can return after facing the challenges of the outside world. This does not mean that life suddenly becomes perfect. Difficult moments will still appear. Disagreements will still happen. Responsibilities and stress will still exist. But the difference is that the relationship itself becomes a stable foundation. Instead of creating additional emotional turmoil, it becomes a source of support. Two people facing life together rather than struggling against each other. Over time, this stability allows love to deepen in ways that dramatic intensity never could. Trust grows stronger. Understanding becomes more intuitive. Both individuals begin to appreciate the quiet beauty of everyday moments together. A shared meal, a peaceful walk, a conversation at the end of a long day. These moments may seem ordinary, but they carry a profound sense of connection. Because after everything the journey has revealed, every challenge, every lesson, every period of separation, both people understand something important. Love does not need to be chaotic to be real. In fact, the deepest love often feels the most peaceful. And perhaps this is the final lesson of the twin flame journey. The path that once seemed filled with emotional storms eventually leads to inner calm. The connection that once triggered fear eventually becomes a source of security. And the love that once felt overwhelming eventually becomes something steady, grounded, and enduring. Not because the connection lost its magic, but because both souls learned how to hold that magic without fear. When love reaches the stage, it no longer needs constant confirmation. It simply exists, quietly, naturally, like a gentle light that continues shining long after the storm has passed. And in that light, two souls finally understand what the journey was always leading them toward. Not just reunion, but peace.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you.